The peoples of the West.
On becoming acquainted with the Indians, I found almost every character in civilized society can be traced among them. From the gravity of a judge to a merry jester, from open-hearted generosity to the avaricious miser.
But the trade with the natives is turning vicious and ugly. The amount of liquor traded more than doubles as competition between the Nor'westers and the Baymen intensifies. David Thompson is one of the few fur traders to defy convention.
I made it a law to myself that no alcohol should pass the mountains in my company, and thus be clear of the sad sight of drunkenness and its many evils. But these gentlemen insisted upon alcohol, being the most profitable article that could be taken for the Indian trade. In this, I knew they had miscalculated.
Thompson has been with the Hudson's Bay Company for 13 years, and he is becoming frustrated and restless. While Nor'westers like Alexander Mackenzie are achieving fame and great fortune, Thompson is ordered to stop surveying, return to Hudson Bay, and focus on fur trading. In 1797, he chooses a different option.
Tuesday, set off. This day left the service of the Hudson's Bay Company and entered that of the Company of Merchants from Canada. May God Almighty prosper me.
He walks 80 miles in the snow to the nearest Northwest Company post. The Nor'westers offer him more money, more opportunity, and they encourage him to fill the missing portions of his emerging map of the Northwest. Now he feels he is with the real adventurers.
How very different the liberal and public spirit of this Northwest Company of Merchants from Canada from the mean, selfish policy of the Hudson's Bay Company. Styled, honorable.
And so begin his greatest years of exploring. David Thompson will continue his extraordinary Western travels. Alexander Mackenzie once said that Thompson accomplished more in 10 months than he would have thought possible in 2 years. But David Thompson's most celebrated trip still lies before him. By 1810, David Thompson has built Northwest Company trading posts and pioneered routes deep into the Rocky Mountains. He is about to go on leave when he receives new orders. He is to head to the Pacific Ocean.
The critical situation of our affairs in the Columbia obliged me to return there. I am getting tired of such constant, hard journeys. The last 20 months I have spent only bare 2 months under the shelter of a hut. All the rest has been in my tent, and there is little likelihood the next 12 months will be much otherwise.
The situation is critical because the Americans are heading to the Pacific. New York City is the headquarters of John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company. The most powerful businessman in the United States plans to build a trading post at the mouth of the mightiest river leading into the Pacific, the Columbia. In September 1810, Astor's ship, the Tonquin, set sail on a voyage around Cape Horn to the Columbia River. Meanwhile, David Thompson is sent overland to secure the Nor'westers' interests. Trouble begins almost immediately. Thompson and a small party are on horseback. They plan to meet the rest of the expedition traveling by canoe. They are in Pagan territory. The Pagan are furious with the Nor'westers for supplying their enemies with guns. When Thompson arrives at the rendezvous point, there are no canoes.
I thought some accident had happened. I told Mr. Henry to proceed through the woods, down the river in search of the canoes and see what detained them, with positive orders not to fire a shot, but in self-defense.
But one of William Henry's men disobeys. Now the Pagan can track them down.
I told them that they had acted very foolishly, that the Pagan Indians would be on us very early in the morning, and that we must start at the dawn of day and ride for our lives.
They ride until dark, not knowing whether they are being followed.
We made a small fire and passed the night with some anxiety. My situation precluded sleep. Cut off from my men, uncertain where to find them, and equally so of the movements of the Indians, I was at a loss what to do, or which way to proceed. Morning came, and I had to determine what course to take. After being much perplexed whether to take to the defiles of the mountains or try to find my men in canoes, I determined that finding my men was of the most importance.
Eventually, he does connect with his missing men, but the Pagan have blockaded his planned route through the mountains. With winter closing in, he has to detour hundreds of miles north toward the Athabasca River, into territory he has never charted, facing a new threat: avalanches.
We must now change our route to the defiles of the Athabasca River, which would place us in safety, but will be attended with great inconvenience, fatigue, suffering, and privation. But there was no alternative.
In the deep snow, they have to abandon their horses and rely on dog sleds. While Thompson struggles in the Athabasca Pass, the Tonquin rounds Cape Horn. It is now only a matter of weeks before John Jacob Astor's men reach the Columbia. And Thompson is still climbing.
January 9th, hauling very bad. The weather so mild that the snow is dropping from the trees and everything wet. We could proceed only about 4 miles. The snow is full 7 feet deep, the dogs often sunk in it, but our snowshoes did not sink more than 3 inches.
No matter what hardships his men endure during the day, every clear evening, David Thompson takes mathematical readings. While inching across the mountains, the man who looks at stars is studying infinity and precisely charting his journey. Finally, after 3 months, David Thompson and his men reach the crest of the mountains.
My men admired the brilliancy of the stars, and as one of them said, he thought he could almost touch them with his hand. As usual, when the fire was made, I set off to examine the country before us. Many reflections came to my mind. A new world was, in a manner, before me.
The Athabasca Pass. David Thompson's route through the mountains will be used by fur traders for half a century. But for now, Thompson's party can go no further. They are snowbound, stuck for the rest of the winter. Meanwhile, the Tonquin arrives at the mouth of the Columbia River, and Astor's men start building a fort. When the pass is clear in the spring, David Thompson sets off down the Columbia, methodically establishing trading alliances along the way.
My reason for putting ashore with the natives is to make friends with them against my return. For in descending the current of a large river, we might pass on without much attention to them, but on returning against the current, our progress will be slow and close along the shore, and consequently very much in their power.
And he claims the territory he passes for his country and company.
Here I erected a small pole with half a sheet of paper well tied about it with these words on it. Know hereby that this country is claimed by Great Britain as part of its territories, and that the Northwest Company of Merchants from Canada do hereby intend to erect a factory on this place for the commerce of the country around.
But when Thompson arrives at the mouth of the Columbia, the American flag is already flying over Fort Astoria. The land will be bought, sold, and contested, but will eventually become Oregon. Still, it is a personal triumph. David Thompson has found a viable trade route and crossed the continent. He has reached the Pacific Ocean.
Thus, I have fully completed the survey of this part of North America. From sea to sea, and by almost innumerable astronomical observations, have determined the positions of the mountains, lakes, and rivers, and other remarkable places on the northern part of this continent.
David Thompson will now take his survey notes and observations and start work on his master project, a map of the Great Northwest. The Northwest Company is overextended. By 1810, the Montreal merchants have hundreds of fur trade posts in the far reaches of the continent. Their very success puts them in peril because of the long journey from the outlying fur country back to Montreal. The plains near Lake Winnipeg, where the Red and Assiniboine rivers join, are crucial to the Nor'westers' survival. Their long expeditions depend on dried buffalo meat, pemmican. These lands are the Northwest Company's food depot. The Northwest Company's buffalo hunters are Métis, descendants of traders and natives. To these children of the fur trade, this is Northwest Company domain and their homeland. But technically, the Hudson's Bay Company owns the land, and the Nor'westers are squatters. The land along the Red River could be sold, and in 1811 it is. Lord Selkirk, a caring but somewhat impractical aristocrat, decides to settle the land with impoverished farmers, mainly from his native Scotland. The philanthropist buys a third of Hudson's Bay Company shares and 116,000 square miles along the Red River. Lord Selkirk has never been there, but that doesn't diminish his dream of a homeland for the poor and the dispossessed.
Every person of any intelligence or skill in agriculture who has visited this country has been struck with the extraordinary fertility of the soil, the facility of cultivation, and the abundance of its spontaneous productions.
The Northwest Company calls Selkirk's scheme mad. Simon McGilvery puts it simply.
He must be driven to abandon it, for his success would strike at the very existence of our trade.
Fields and fences will threaten the Nor'westers' food supply and trade routes. Settlement will inevitably provoke confrontation. After a 2-month trip across the ocean and 50 days rowing upstream from Hudson Bay, the first Selkirk settlers approach Red River. To them, this is the promised land. They were assured that a settlement has been built and is ready for them. Hector McEachern, John McVicker, and Alexander McLean, whose wife delivered a son on the 4-month voyage. They arrive to distressing news. The settlement isn't ready. They have to take their possessions south by land to find shelter before the winter sets in. In Scotland, the Northwest Company has tried to undermine the settlement, scaring the settlers with tales of warlike natives. In fact, it is the natives who lead the first settlers south to their camp for the winter. To Peguis, the Ojibwa chief, this is neither Northwest Company nor Hudson's Bay Company territory. It can be shared.
These are not my lands. They belong to our great father. For it is only he who gives us the means of our existence. For what would become of us if he left us to ourselves? We would wither like the grass on the plains.
The following spring, the Selkirk settlers go back to Red River. The first European farmers on the Canadian prairies start building a new life in a new land. The Métis and the Nor'westers can coexist with a few settlers. But if they keep coming, the buffalo hunter's way of life is doomed. And they do keep coming. Each year after 1812, a new group of settlers, and each year they arrive too late to plant crops. The Selkirk settlers are starving, struggling to survive. The Hudson's Bay Company governor takes desperate action. Miles MacDonnell issues the Pemmican Proclamation, banning the export of food from Red River, preventing the Northwest Company from supplying its trading posts. It is MacDonnell's first act of provocation.
It is hereby ordered that no persons trading in furs or provisions within the territory shall take out any provisions, either of flesh, fish, game, or vegetables. Whosoever shall be detected in attempting to carry out any provisions shall be taken into custody and prosecuted.
Then MacDonnell orders the Northwest Company to leave Hudson's Bay Company land. The Nor'westers respond immediately and bluntly. Their agent in Red River is Duncan Cameron.
MacDonnell is now determined not only to seize our pemmican, but to drive us out of the Assiniboia district, and consequently out of the Northwest. Hostilities will no doubt begin early this spring.
Duncan Cameron calls the Métis buffalo hunters to a meeting at Fort Gibraltar, the Northwest Company's post in Red River, or Assiniboia, as Cameron calls it. He tells them they are a new nation, a distinct people, facing enslavement by the settlers.
You must assist me in driving away the colony. If they are not drove away, the consequences will be they will prevent you from hunting. They will starve your families. They will put their feet in the neck of those that attempt to resist them. You can easily see how they mean to finish, by what they have begun already.
Cameron urges the Métis to destroy the settlement. He devises guerrilla tactics. The Métis are to put on war paint and burn out the settlers. John Pritchard's home is barely a year old when it is attacked.
They immediately began to burn down our houses in the daytime and fire upon us during the night, saying the country was theirs. If we did not immediately quit the settlement, they would plunder us of our property and burn the houses over our heads.
Violence breaks out in trading posts across the West. In June 1816, at a place called Seven Oaks in Red River, 28 Baymen and settlers confront 61 Métis and natives. When it is all over, 21 Baymen and 1 native lie dead. In Britain, the Colonial Office calls for a truce. Amalgamation seems the only answer. In 1821, exhausted by the violence and impoverished by relentless expansion, the Northwest Company agrees to a merger. Two great companies have disputed the possession of the West for half a century. Now they join forces under the name of the Hudson's Bay Company. The long fight is over. The Selkirk settlers have begun a new era. The West will never be the same. The fur trade war is decreed over in the boardroom, but peace has not been declared in the backcountry. Making amalgamation work falls to a man they call the Little Emperor, the Hudson's Bay Company's George Simpson. He takes to the job with ruthless efficiency.
It is high time the system